Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Biochemistry Section's Career Advancement webinar. Our theme for this evening is Choosing Your Future, and I am your Biochemistry Section representative and host for this evening, Nicole Pinnock. Thank you guys for joining. So we're gonna get started right away. We have this evening 3 special select guests who will be speaking to you about career choice, career advancement, and their journey in terms of their academic journey, their professional journey, and essentially how they got to where they are now by starting where you are today. So we hope for this evening to be very productive. We want it to be very beneficial for our students. And as such, after each speaker has presented, we want you to, of course, ask all your questions and make all your questions known in the chat that accompanies the YouTube Live. So thank you guys again for joining us. And again, we hope for this session to be beneficial to you and that you will be receiving some valuable insight. This session, again, is geared at assisting students within the biochemistry section on in assessing their career paths so that you would be on the right path to a successful career. So let's get right into it, introducing our first speaker for this evening. And she is Dr. Carrion Smith. Dr. Smith is currently an assistant professor with a research focus at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she specializes in molecular and cellular biology with an eye towards translational research. Dr. Smith received her Bachelor of Science honors and Master of Philosophy degrees in biochemistry and molecular biology from the University of the West Indies. She completed a PhD from the University of Georgia, where her work primarily focused on cancer gene function in embryonic stem cell maintenance and differentiation. Her current research stems from her postdoctoral work at the University of North Carolina, where she began to delve into the function of genomic sequence, formerly considered junk DNA. Dr. Smith has a keen interest in entrepreneurship, and she actively seeks opportunities in this area, particularly pertaining to bioentrepreneurship and its potential to stimulate economic and social development. She also has a demonstrable history and passion for building communities, and with this fuel, she has founded the Society for Scientific Advancement, the SOSA, to facilitate the technology transfer and improve STEM research and education, particularly for developing countries in the Caribbean. Dr. Smith continues to participate in mentoring Generation Next and providing strategic development and consulting experience pertaining to various startup entities. This, along with her academic accomplishments, has been reflected in various institutional, regional, and national awards throughout her career. Please help me welcome our first guest for this evening, Dr. Carrion Smith. Welcome, Dr. Smith.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pinnock. Thank you for that kind welcome.
You're welcome.
So I was asked, and feel free to kind of jump in at any time if there are particular questions that you'd like for me to address. But I was asked to kind of give you an idea of how I got to where I am today. And as Miss Pinnock nicely, kindly said earlier, I started out kind of where you are, in undergrad and doing my MPhil at UE, not so long ago. And when I was there, actually, I entered UE with the idea of going to medical school. Um, and it wasn't until that I had my first research experience with your very own Professor Marcia Roy, that kind of changed for me. So that's when I really got interested in asking questions that nobody understood. And then that's where my interest in research developed. So after my undergrad and um, master's at UWI, I then went on to do a PhD again in biochemistry and molecular biology at the University of Georgia. Now, up until then, I was really interested, similar to Prof. Roy, in plant virology, molecular virology, that kind of thing, focused heavily on plant diseases. At the University of Georgia, I got introduced to different avenues of research, and found the path that I kind of have stayed on as I pursued a more independent research career. So now I'm focused on stem cell biology, which stem cells are these cells in the body that can, they're kind of immortal on one hand, and then they can also differentiate into many of the cell types you'll find in the body. And that just fascinates me. What is it that gives these cells the property to just continuously proliferate, staying healthy? And yet, if you stimulate them with certain chemicals, they can form nerve cells, heart cells, muscle cells, you name it. That's still a puzzle that remains today. So that's when I got introduced to stem cell biology. And from there, I went on to do a postdoc at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which is where I stayed on as a faculty member. Now, interestingly, at least to me, I don't know that throughout graduate school, I founded an organization kind of because at the time, it was emerging that the number of faculty positions for, PhDs in training were just dwindling, or they weren't increasing enough to keep up with the pace of the number of PhDs that they were training. So I kind of didn't anticipate that I'd end up in academia per se, because I have many other interests. I'm very interested in scientific writing, for example. I like putting together a finished product. It doesn't have to be strictly scientific related. I kind of like the design aspect of science communication. I feel like I could be a good consultant. I really like the idea of identifying a particular project and kind of, problem solving, troubleshooting to overcome that hurdle, whatever the problem is defined, and kind of wrapping that up and moving on to something else. So there are many kind of non-traditional academic jobs that interest me. But somehow I ended up where I am, which is a great place to be. I'm in a very, a department that's very supportive of research, a department that's extremely productive, where people are really generous with their knowledge and reagents. So, I ended up here, and this is where I think I'm performing nicely and kind of, progressing as I should be on a traditional kind of academic track. In terms of finding employment, that was another topic I was kind of asked to touch on. For me, it's kind of been the expected, you follow the steps that were laid out. And, that people have kind of trod that path before me. So, undergrad, graduate school, a postdoc, and then academia. Although I will say that my appointment is kind of non-traditional in terms of I have a research focus and not much teaching. So that's one thing that I guess is unique. But at the same time, as was mentioned in the introduction, I also run a nonprofit. This is kind of because I wanted a way to give back to my community at home. So, I left to come to grad school. In my field, it was kind of really hard I had these fantasies of being able to contribute to stem cell research in Jamaica. It's really hard to kind of move that research program back home. So SOSA, or the Society for Scientific Advancement, was kind of my way to still contribute to the scientific community on the ground at home. And it kind of fulfills all my other interests in terms of I'm very interested in, as was mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship, starting things, program development, program execution. So it's my kind of hobby on the side that's also fulfills my other kind of career interests. So, so SOSA, although it's not employment, it's, well, depending on how you think about it, because the time can be consuming. It's very rewarding in terms of getting my mind outside of the lab, and solving problems that way. So in short, I think that's, I've been rambling, telling you about my background. So I'm really happy to answer any questions, or, talk a little bit more about any of the stops on that journey that you'd like to hear about.
Okay, one question about your undergraduate studies. So you completed your undergraduate studies in biochemistry, yes?
Yes.
At what point did you decide, your first year, second year, final year, at what point did you decide biochemistry is what I want to do?
So fairly early, because, well, maybe midway. So biochemistry and molecular biology is kind of one of those things that then you can take and do many things. Like I was interested, in like plant biology to a certain stage, like plant tissue culture just was a fascinating process, to take a little piece of plant and watch it regenerate. But to me, that kind of felt like, oh, I'm picking something that would lead me down a very specific road. And biochemistry felt like, okay, I could apply this to understand processes in plants, or I could apply it to diseases. So it was more broadly applicable. So, it kind of finalized somewhere maybe halfway, but then hardcore later on, because especially when I was introduced to research.
Also, at any point while doing your biochemistry, you always hear pure and applied sciences is hard and it's a lot of stress. At any point, did you consider changing to something else and be like, okay, I'm over this? Let me just go to something else because this is too hard, this is too much.
So chemistry, with biochemistry, you have to do a lot of chemistry. And chemistry was not my friend, so it's not that the journey was easy, because there are some courses in organic and organic chemistry, I got through them because you kind of had to, or, you found a kind of support network that helped, or eventually kind of figured out a way, not that the grades were the best or whatever. So I don't, and I think my support system was that even when I felt probably, slightly dejected because of whatever reason, I had a support system around me that, kind of boosted each other. So I don't know that I ever considered jumping off the biochemistry track. I certainly did questioned more about research, especially when it got to the point of experiments failing, and then but this was supposed to work, why didn't it work, that kind of thing. But for biochemistry itself, I think once I started, I was kind of committed and stuck to it because of its versatility.
Okay. All right, thank you. Also, I want to ask, you did say while doing your undergraduate studies, you are familiar with Professor Roy, which we love. We love her dearly. Would you say she would be one of your inspirations in wanting to do biochemistry and in particular molecular virology?
Oh, definitely. That lady is a superstar. Okay. She's definitely an inspiration. She's definitely a mentor. She's definitely someone who, you just know that they have your back, and she demonstrated over and over that she was that person for me. I kind of looked out to fall into that relationship at a formative stage. where one of my early kind of individual mentors was, somebody like that who kind of just demonstrated support across the board. And just kind of looking back on that relationship, I'd really kind of encourage, like, mentorship is so important, and finding a really good mentor, especially depending on your career track, is just so important. And then especially if you're unsure about what you want to do, kind of identifying, and peer mentors are just as important. But trying to identify individuals who you can seek. You need advice in area A, you can turn to individual A. You need advice in area B, turn to individual B. But if you can get those really strong people in your corner earlier than later, that would be just super helpful. And it really was helpful for me.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from a student in the chat here. Did you take any breaks in your education?
Formally, in undergrad, I won't say those were breaks, but no, formally, I did not. I kind of continued, from undergrad straight into the master's. I did finish my like research aspects of my Enfield project, like that kind of overlapped with grad school, which is kind of that was a little out of the ordinary. But I didn't take any formal breaks, and I think that's really helpful for some people, and it probably isn't for others, just depending on your personality. I think for some people, a break is really important to kind of re-energize and refocus and really figure out what you want to do. And for other people, once they take the break and the momentum falls off, it's really hard to get them going. So you kind of just have to know yourself and know which one of those things would help you. Thanks for that question.
Okay. No problem. Another question is, well, it's similar to the first that we asked. Did you jump straight into Enfield, which you said yes, you did, instead of going straight into work in your field of study? And I think you answered that just now. Another question is, what advice do you have for finding suitable employment after completing a bachelor in biochemistry? Should we seek for internship?
Yes. So, based on technology, society is kind of changing a lot and changing rapidly. Like social media is, when you think about it, how it's changed, how you make introductions and the impact it can have on your career, it's astounding. So in terms of finding employment, you hear this word networking. My personality personally isn't really one for networking kind of on large scales. I'm kind of more introverted, so I like networking in small doses. So like a meaningful conversation with one person or three people, not mingling in a big room. That's not my thing. But it's for some people. So whichever thing is your thing, kind of figure that out and make those contacts. So through through networking, for example, you can meet people in the profession that you kind of envision yourself in, and then you can talk to them about their day-to-day. And then that way you can kind of just test the waters about, oh, that sounds appealing to me. Oh, I thought that sounded cool when I was reading about it. But when I actually started talking to someone who lives that day-to-day, it's not so appealing. And then any experience that you can get in, internships, if that works for you, if that's open and available to you, that can't hurt. Sometimes, depending on what you're trying to do, internships won't necessarily be available, and that's where kind of networking and doing these so-called kind of informational interviews, where you don't talk to that person to necessarily help you to get the job. You talk to them to learn more about the field, more about what they do, and kind of for introductions. In them talking to you, you get to know more and get to kind of figure out, oh, who else should you be talking to and what important questions you should be asking about the field that you're interested in.
All right. You did mention network with professionals that are in the fields that you want to be in or specialize in. Um, what spaces do you think we can network in? Should we start with our lecturers, or what organizations can we join in order to network with these persons?
So regarding the social media platform, like LinkedIn is kind of just revolutionizing how people even get jobs, how people get introduced to people. So that would be one avenue that is low key. So you can, you don't have to necessarily put yourself out there initially, but after, you get comfortable, you can start to kind of introduce yourself to people through platforms such as those. And then, person to person networking where, people who know you best can give you introductions to people who they may know that could help you. So tap into anyone who kind of is doing something like what you want to do, or you figure they may know someone that is doing that very same thing. So it's kind of, you just have to create your own networking strategy, and it's it can be so individualized that there's not necessarily a protocol to do it. You just figure out what may work best for you, personality wise, and strategy wise, and just get creative with it. The thing is to try something versus like sitting back and waiting.
Okay, thank you. There's another question for you. A student says, I am interested in pursuing a thesis-based master's, but I'm very unsure as to what my thesis would be. Do you have any advice on how to choose one?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thanks for that question. So it really should be an area that you're interested in. Research kind of comes with these inherent difficulties in terms of, you're doing something that nobody knows either anything about or a lot about. And you're trying to contribute this new knowledge. That will come with a little bit of failure just because it's the unknown. So if it's something that you're interested in, that kind of just helps you to keep going when you encounter those failures. So that's one thing. And then if you can double that area or couple that area of interest with um, someone who is an excellent mentor, that would even, so then you kind of, that's, double the prize there, right? And in terms of finding a good mentor, there are people who talk to other graduate students, talk to postgrads who have are in the same department, in the same faculty with the prospective mentor that you're thinking about, to get some history. Oh, what's their mentorship style? Because different mentorship styles work differently for different people. Some people like a really hands-on kind of managerial approach, and others like more space and more freedom to kind of think. So in terms of finding a topic, I'd say think about what's out there in terms of what interests you that you could wake up doing every day. And then if you can find a mentor that's really supportive and has that track record, that would be fantastic, I think.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. I think that's all the questions that we have for you for now. So thank you so much for being here and being a part of this initiative. We're going to move on to our second guest speaker at this time. And please be reminded, everyone, all your questions, all your concerns that you would like to be addressed, you can ask them in the chat as we move along throughout the session. All right, so moving right along to our second guest speaker. Our second guest speaker is currently the founder and director of the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council. She's a proud Jamaican scientist and researcher. She has experience with coordinating and managing social and environmental projects, and is passionate about advancing scientific research and innovation in Jamaica. She's a dedicated research student, exploring new antimicrobial compounds from soil, bacteria, and is an experienced laboratory demonstrator with the zeal for ensuring younger students developed a love for sciences. Miss Eleanor Terlong completed her Bachelor of Science in Molecular Biology at the University of the West Indies and is now a PhD candidate at UWI doing studies and research in the field of molecular biology. Because of her wide range of interests and passion for development in Jamaica, she has also dedicated a lot of time to voluntary pursuits that engage and educate young persons about important causes, including climate change resilience and mental health awareness. This is reflected in her being awarded the Prime Minister's Youth Award for Education environmental communication in 2018. In addition to her scientific background, she is also an avid writer, blogger, and online researcher with skills in organization, leadership, and project management. Please welcome our second guest, Miss Eleanor Terlong.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. All right, you want me to just go? Okay, so hi again. Thank you for having me. All right, let me share a bit of my story. It's a little bit unconventional. So as you'd have heard, I did my undergrad in molecular biology at UWI. I kind of knew I wanted to do molecular biology from about fifth form when we started to do genetic crossings, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool, this is what I want to do in my life. So I had my science subjects. I was super bright in high school, so the assumption was always that, oh, you're going to do med, and I kept having to have these conversations, especially with my parents, that I don't want to do med. So I went to UA. My first semester was a complete disaster. I failed chem, I failed math, failed both of the math courses that I had. And I know that a lot of persons can resonate with failing that Chem 1901 course. But yes, I came out of high school feeling that I was bright, and then I got to UA and I definitely was not bright. So I think after that first semester, I kind of realized that I need to get myself together and buckle down. So I did that, and I ended up graduating in 2014 with my upper second class. So I kind of made up back the GPA. Right after I finished undergrad, I moved into my Enfield PhD project. My supervisor is Dr. Charlene Brown. And as you'd have mentioned in my bio, my project is on soil bacteria actinomycetes, and I'm trying to find antimicrobial compounds from them. So that's kind of my journey. I went into research, one, because I didn't have enough education to know what science careers there were outside of research. So even when I started doing mol bio in undergrad, there was always the assumption that, okay, I'm going to have to go into research because that is the path that you're supposed to take in science. There's no work around for molecular biologists. Well, that was the thinking at the time. So I did go straight into the PhD program. And I'm still in the PhD program, currently on leave of absence because of COVID and all of that. But that's where I'm at. During my research process, so when I was in third year, there's a research project course that you can do for the year. I did that course first, and I realized that, okay, I do like being in the lab. I like doing lab work. I like doing microbe and all of those stuff. I'm going to enjoy research because research means you get to be in the lab all the time. That's what I thought. I heard Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith was before me. I hope I'm not getting your name wrong. Dr. Smith before me talking about how it feels when your experiments start to fail. And when my experiments started to fail and fail and fail, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this research thing. So for me, I kind of started to look at, after I get my PhD, then what? Do I want to open my lab? Do I really want to do research? How am I going to kind of use the skills that I have? One of the things that I've tried to do, even as an undergrad coming up, was that I always tried to take additional courses. So I did some SOSI courses, I did like psych courses, I did management courses. When I started my PhD, I did a project management certificate over by MSBM because I wanted to make sure I always had that balance of skills. to kind of be, because I realized that I didn't want to stay in academia. I didn't want to do research. There was a point where I realized that this is not what I want to spend my life doing. So it's kind of, okay, how do I leverage the skills that I have, and make sure that I have the skills that I'm what I want to do. So that's my roundabout story. In 2017, I accidentally founded the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council. And I say accidentally because the plan was never to start an organization. I just wanted to be involved. But I ended up starting an organization that is still running. So I guess that's what I'm doing now. I'm through that work because I'm still a scientist at heart. So I do work in climate change, even though it's not my particular area of research. It is something that is important to me. And I think that just respecting science on a whole, especially where we are right now, it's a real need. So for me, I know that I want to kind of stay in the climate change sustainability space for a little while, maybe another 5-10 years, just to see. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I'm not putting any long-term goals on it, but I think right now that is where my calling is. That's the best use of my skills. I also like to think of myself as a science communicator. I think that if you ask me what my dream job is a science communicator. So as you mentioned, I don't really write as much, but I used to write a science blog. I now have a podcast, a science podcast. And I think it's so important for us, so especially like with COVID, it's so important that we have people that understand the science who can explain it to the layperson. I think that, as scientists, we're not always the best communicators. And I think that, we really do need to bridge that gap more, especially in Jamaica. So for me, I think that that's kind of the side of my career I want to build. As soon as I'm done the PhD and I have the doctor behind my name and I can be like, yes. But I don't know exactly what form that career is going to take yet. As I said, I'm kind of new to it. And science communication in Jamaica is kind of different from science communication across the world. Dr. Smith was talking about networking. So on my Twitter, I follow scientists from all over the world. And it's really been a very eye-opening experience for me. One, because I think being at UWI, when things go wrong, you feel like this is just this third world country and nothing can go wrong, and I wish I could go abroad. But then I see the people abroad having some of the same problems that we're having, and you realize that when it comes to research, there are just certain things that you expect. And that kind of community is very helpful. I've learned a lot from science communicators that I follow. So you have some that have YouTube pages, you have some that write for different magazines, you have some, there's this one girl I follow, Raven the Science Maven. She does like music videos out of science, and now she started a clothing line. So there's so much potential out there to tap into. So for me, it's kind of, I haven't quite figured out where I fit into it. But that is it. So what I wanted to bring across today is that when you're thinking of science careers, sometimes you kind of have to think outside the box. The reality is that there are a limited number of science jobs in Jamaica. Like, we can't sugarcoat it. And we're not always going to be able to get a career, especially right out of school, directly in the field, in the narrow channel that we want. I think as science students, the way that we are trained and taught to think gives us a lot of transferable skills. So that's why when science students go to SOSI, they tend to do a lot better than if it were the other way around. So I think my advice to you guys would to be kind of, don't get married to this box that, okay, I'm doing biochemistry, so I have to be a lab tech, or I have to work at Bureau of Standards, or I have to go to SRC. And those are the options. I think that, we kind of need to think a little bit more creatively, how we can apply our skills. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say now. And then if you have any other questions, you can ask.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your valuable insight. So obviously we see that diversification and versatility is key. We also mentioned that you are the founder and director of Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, like you said you founded by accident. What do you do there? What is the council about?
Okay, so we are a completely voluntary group. Let me start there. So we don't get paid. Our overall aim is to raise awareness about climate change among young Jamaicans, and to kind of provide a space for young people who are interested in climate change to be able to participate in initiatives. So I'm going to do prior to COVID. So prior to COVID, we did things like school visits. We had an annual expo that we did every year with high school students. So they would come in, they get some hands-on climate change training. They can see organizations in the climate change environmental space. We had a number of panel discussions, tree plantings, community cleanup. So all of that was pre-COVID. And then COVID came and kind of mashed up the show. So we've kind of been focusing more on the advocacy side of climate change. So talking directly to the ministers and the policymakers and those persons about the issues, and continuing to engage them in that way. A major project that we are now in the process of implementing is our Albion Heights Green Community Project. So we've gone out to a community in St. Thomas. It's a pretty rural community. They don't have like regular light, water, garbage collection. So we're going in and we're putting in solar street lamps, recycling program, rainwater harvesting equipment. So kind of solve these community problems, but do it in a green way. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we've been up to. All volunteer.
Okay. About your council again, is there any way that you incorporate your research in molecular biology and microbiology into your work at the council?
Not me specifically, not my research specifically, but we do also have persons at UA that are studying that are on the council. So we also have persons overseas. So for example, our associate director now, he's doing a PhD overseas and he's focusing on environmental justice. So a lot of the advocacy work that we do ties into that. So not my research specifically, but other persons on the council, yes.
All right. There was a question in the chat asking, how can we join this climate change council?
Can I drop a link somewhere that persons can see? I don't know how to do that. Okay, you can email us at ourfootprintja@gmail.com. So ourfootprintja@gmail.com.
Okay, there you go, guys. Another question for you. What are the career alternatives for molecular biology majors other than research?
Okay, there's the forensics aspect of it. So if you don't want to go and research, a lot of persons, I know there's an MSc forensics course that has it has different components. So you can do the chemistry strain or the mol bio strain. A lot of persons do that and go on to work in forensics, whether here in Jamaica or overseas. Sorry, remind me of what the exception was. Other than research. Okay. Right, so forensics would be one of them. The word research is kind of broad, so it's kind of hard for me to answer when you say outside of research, because you can work with an agency on a particular project that it's still considered research. You can work in drug development. I don't know how much opportunity there is in Jamaica, but if you are looking overseas, you can work in drug development, testing. I know with COVID now, there are a lot of, I don't know how accessible they are, but I know there are a lot of options for young researchers to become involved. So, yeah.
Okay. A student was asking, what is the name of your blog? Even though you say you don't write a lot.
Don't follow my blog. You can follow my podcast. It's Two Nerds Start a Podcast.
I think that is it for you. Maybe a final question. You said you came to high school really thinking you were bright. You came to university thinking you were bright. Do you want to mention which high school you are coming from?
Sure, I was coming from the Bishop Gibson High School and the Manchester High School, and I was very bright. And it's not that the schools they're not bright; it's just that you is a lot of people, and I was not prepared for the workload that was expected of me. Yeah. Oh, I do want to say, because I was asked in the previous presenter, I did go straight through my studies, and I think if I had the chance to do it again, I would definitely take a break between my undergrad and my MPhil years. I think that I would have benefited a lot from some outside perspective. As I said, well, when I kind of got into the program, I never had a conversation like this to know that there were options outside of research. Not that I wouldn't do it, but I think that it would have benefited me and I'd have been able to make a more informed decision about what I was doing rather than just going into the program because that's what I was supposed to do. So, yeah.
Okay. Also, in regards to you doing courses outside of the Faculty of Science and Technology, what courses or minors maybe would you recommend are a good combination with majors in the biochemistry section?
Well, I didn't do a minor. Personally, I think they're a waste of time, but that's just me because you can do the courses without getting a minor. Please don't feel offended if you're getting a minor. That's just me. I did, so how I had done it as well, because I failed chem, I ended up having to do it in summer school. So I did that first summer school and I used that to clear out all of my foundation courses. And then that meant I had more time in my timetable to kind of play with my courses. So I did the Intro to Psych course. I did Managerial Communication, which I think is a very good course. In terms of learning to communicate, I think it's very helpful. It's like FD 14A, but without all the work, and you actually learn some interesting stuff. I did a couple other psych courses. I did Interpersonal Dynamics. And then I would have done the research project in third year, which would have taken up my credits. For me, I didn't want to take up another lab course. So I was trying to find all the options that could fit into my timetable without having to be another lab course. And I know third year is rough. I've seen a lot of people do like the chemistry, biochemistry double major or the minor, and it's rough. So I decided not to do that. So yeah, I'm trying to remember what else I did, but clearly nothing important.
Okay. And we have another
Principles
question.
of marketing. Sorry, that was the other one. Principles of marketing. Yes.
All right. We have another question from a student here. How were you able to finance your education?
Okay, well, I was fortunate. I was bright in high school, so I was awarded a scholarship for my undergrad years. Almost lost it because of the chem and the maths. But I did have that privilege to be able to finish my undergrad without having to pay fees. In terms of the MPhil PhD program, that's a fully funded program, so you don't have to pay school fees. So I haven't paid school fees in the past however long. It's really just been kind of maintaining myself. Those are my biggest expenses.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Sarah Long, for being a guest at our webinar today. We really appreciate you coming. And for the persons on the live that are tuning into the live, some takeaways from the session: the importance of versatility and diversity. And research is not your only option. You can delve into something other than research when you're doing your biochemistry, molecular biology, biotechnology, or microbiology majors, and when choosing a career path. Before we move on to our third guest, just a PSA from the Life Sciences Department, which will be hosting part one of their career fair this week, focusing on marine biology. So more details will be provided to you throughout the course of this week for persons tuning in. Now for our third and final guest for this evening, Dr. Yolanda Nesbeth. Dr. Yolanda Nesbeth currently serves as Director of Strategy and Operations, lead worldwide medical oncology at the Bristol-Myers Squibb where she coordinates critical and strategic departmental initiatives across tumor asset activities to advance the pipeline and drive operational excellence across the worldwide medical oncology franchise. Dr. Nesbeth was previously the director and site head in the Greater Washington, D.C. area at Celdar Medical, where she led strategic and operational functions to advance a portfolio of preclinical therapeutic programs such as oncology, fibrotic and infectious diseases, and a clinical diagnostic service. While at Celdar Medical, Dr. Nesbeth built from academic concept to multi-million-dollar business, brought to market and managed the first and only diagnostic service providing molecular diagnostic for systemic sclerosis patients, clinicians, and drug developers, including managing all strategic planning, operations, personnel, and financials. Prior to Celdar Medical, Dr. Nesbeth served as a consultant with Clarion Healthcare, providing strategic advice regarding drug development to pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies. Dr. Nesbeth received her PhD in microbiology and immunology from the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth College, where her thesis research focused on developing therapeutic, cell-based, and other immunotherapies for targeting the tumor microenvironment in ovarian cancer. Dr. Nesbeth was a recipient of the University of the West Indies Open Scholarship while completing her undergraduate studies in molecular biology and French. Dr. Nesbeth has served as a reviewer and chair for multiple U.S. Department of Defense and National Institutes of Health study sections. In her current role, she continues to recruit, mentor, and support early career development. In her spare time, Dr. Nesbeth enjoys traveling, reading, and volunteering with various organizations serving children and youth. Welcome our third guest for this evening, Dr. Yolanda Nesbeth.
Hi, Ms. Pinnock. Thank you so very much for organizing and thanks for having me. So like everyone else, I guess I'll just jump into giving a little bit of a history of my path. Unlike many others, I already knew from the jump that I wanted to get a PhD. So I was kind of just going through the process when I went. So I joined UE, as I mentioned here, just to address the finances. I'll talk to that and some of the other questions as I go through my history. So I also was on a scholarship. So I got the UE Open Scholarship, which was fantastic because it covered my tuition, but I also got a stipend. I just want to share that because it enabled me to do a lot of other more flexible things. So I got a stipend that covered, just living expenses, food, blah, blah, blah. In my first summer, the summer after my first year, I, wanted to get exposure to research a little bit more. And so one of the things I did was, there were two things that I did in that summer. One is I actually went to Professor Asamoto and I said, hey, I'd love to, do some research. And she said, great. And so she was able to help me find two PhD students. So Percival was doing his PhD there, and I forget Co's name, but his nickname was Co. And so I was basically shadowing them, learning different research aspects, bond calorimetry, just all the different aspects to doing their research, supporting them, helping to collect their data. But I was also a guinea pig because Percival was doing some research on the glycemic indices of various yams. And so I had to starve overnight, come eat the food, and they would be testing my glucose as a subject for this study over the time. But anyway, it was interesting because you guys basically get a full sense of, all the different things they had to do, which was even how are they going to find subjects to test a lot of their hypotheses on. And that was because Dr. Asamoto was doing a lot of research on foods and diabetes at the time. The other thing that I did in that summer was I reached out to the Tropical Metabolism Research Unit and basically asked if they had any opportunities. So in the summer of that year, volunteered with them. So I was doing both, going to the TMRU and also volunteering in Professor Asamoto's lab. And at the TMRU, it started off, pretty slowly. And it's interesting because one of the biggest things that they were trying to do at the time was a lit review and organization. And I think at the time I was also like, why are we doing this lit review or whatever? But, as you go through your research career, you realize how critical understanding other publications and, what's been identified to date are, and organizing them. I mean, it was before the popularization of some of these referencing sources. And so we actually had to be like inputting a lot of the lit review directly in and giving little summaries on what they were essentially saying. But it was a good opportunity not only to get that side of it, to understand some of the more, the reading parts of science, but it was also good, I got to see some of the other professors in action. It was also attached to the clinic. So, you saw some of the children coming in and there, you saw, I think it was also helpful just being able to see, the benefit of this research when these children are coming malnourished and they're able to create, different treatment plans to address that in a nice way, just seeing why people are doing the research. Even if you think, oh, malnourishment, that's easy to address, is not, there are underlying issues, especially when you have conflicting conditions that you have to manage with these things. So then after my first year, I actually got a job with the TMRU. So throughout my second and third year, I would actually go in the evenings and work with them to support some of their research and a bunch of other things as well. So in terms of financing, but that came out of my first summer of doing a little bit of, more voluntary kind of activities with them. But if you go into somewhere in a very voluntary position, but you're really dedicated and willing to learn and all of that sort of stuff, you can get a lot out of it, including a job. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that came out again in a later part of my life. But then another opportunity to get some financing in your space of interest. Not necessarily getting a job at a call center or wherever else is available. You can try to figure out ways of continuing in your path. So in my second year, did whatever. I worked at the TMRU in the evenings, and I also should mention, so I did a double major. I did molecular bio and French, and I had a challenge with that, not from the courses, but I had a chemistry professor who was not at all fond of cross-faculty activities. In fact, there was a lab that I had like multiple streams that you could select, and I was put into one stream, and I wanted to switch it so that I could, do my practicals for French. And there was a big argument over, he literally said, you need to pick if you want to be a scientist or an art student. And that was something that was like, I was like, well, that's not going to work. So, I had to go to the dean or whatever. But, it's kind of, piggybacking on what some of the others have said, diversity is really good. It's a good option. Be exposed to a lot of different things, broaden your horizons as much as possible. But then, as I said, the dean was, understanding and helped me navigate the situation of, allowing me to be able to cross faculty and get a broader education. I would also say in response to gaps, I went straight from UWI to my PhD program, but having had my second major in French, I was encouraged also to take a year off, go to France, like many of the French students would have done, teach English in France or something, really capitalize and develop true French native sort of skills and, get that exposure. And for me, I was more like, no, I don't want anything to deviate from my path. I have to, I have to go. I'm happy I went on my path, but at the end of the day, I see, like, looking back, a lot of people who I've worked with, may have taken a year to do all these different other activities, and it didn't set them back. I think it depends on, how you are. There are some people who then, fall off track because, there's no clear, I want to do X, Y, Z next. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to, go and explore other things before going into your, your next stages of life. So in my third year, I took the project course with Dr. Roy, and I basically did, essentially playing with different plant-based bacterial strains. Plant-based, bacterial strains to fight off tobacco H virus and Scotch bonnet peppers. I think my project was basically inconclusive, but it was still a good experience, especially just, monitoring the plants, having to get up every day and go and check all your research subjects, ensure that they're, well maintained, etc. And also just the nitty gritty of understanding, well, what are the implications? What is happening? Setting up the experiment and then following through, and then realizing that you do have to go in and do all the collections and do all the, all those different pieces to get the data and then do the analysis. Just the full. I think that the project was a great example of, what you're going to be going into in research. I mentioned that I had always known what I wanted to do, and so I guess it was the summer before my third year, I took the GRE. Because I knew I wanted to do a PhD. And then at that time, I found, you have a lot of them that you can go straight into your PhD program. And so for me, I don't think that, I know that a lot of people then think, okay, that's very expensive or whatever. I mean, I got a couple books. I did the practice exercise for, I know what I did was I took a 2-week schedule where I did a test in the morning, a test in the evening, blah, blah, blah. And then I did the test. Like, I didn't really go crazy on that. And so, I had that in the summer. So in the third year, I had started my process for applying to universities overseas. And so by about, I think it was about the April of that year, of the third year, that I started to have interviews from various different schools, etc. So for me, as soon as I finished or graduated UWI, I was starting in a PhD program in September of that same year. So I didn't have a gap. I didn't have any break. I just basically continued through. I got accepted to Dartmouth on a full scholarship that covered my tuition, and they give a quite generous a stipend that covers, your living expenses, your food, all of those sorts of stuff. And, in addition to all of that, I did a bunch of different things to bring in a little extra money, house sat, dog sat, whatever it took, if you felt like you just needed extra money, but you had adequate money to maintain all your major needs. While I was at Dartmouth, I also, again, took courses in the business school. So I knew I wanted to be more on the interface of science and business. So I didn't really want to be in academia either. And so I took some courses in the business school network. But then one of the other things, quite similarly, is I reached out to a gentleman who had started a business in the area. He was the husband of one of my professors. And I said, basically, hey, I want to do this. Can I basically intern with you? And so for that summer, before I moved on, I graduated grad school, I interned for 2 months with him, and actually didn't get any compensation, but I was fortunate in that I was able, I knew I had a job starting in the September of that year, and I, finished my PhD, defended in April, continued through, so I got my salary through June, and basically took summer vacation at home in Jamaica, so I didn't have to pay for any sort of expenses, and then moved back up to start my work. So during that summer when I was at home, I was volunteering in this internship, and I was doing it remotely. That was, over a decade ago, basically, sending an email and, doing all the document searches and all those sort of things. And the access was even not as great then as now. And so I did that. I went and did my consulting job for a while. And one day he was just like, hey, would you be interested in coming to work full time for this company? And so I was actually not necessarily in, I was actually not, interested in some of the consulting stuff. and was looking to explore opportunities to be in a more operational role. So meaning be in a startup environment, a biotech environment. Consulting was great. I got exposed to a lot of different things. And so in the consulting industry, what I had done was I worked with, some of the big pharmaceutical companies. They might say, hey, we have this drug and we don't know how to, properly get it into the doctor's hands, or we have this drug that's coming off patent and we don't know how we're going to finance the next steps because we have all these other great drugs that we're moving forward with, but there's a gap in how these are going to be funded. Or worked with smaller companies that had a great way of delivering certain drugs, but they never had a drug to deliver it with. And you have some other companies that have drugs that have high safety, so they would love to partner. So kind of like a lot of different exciting things like that. But I really wanted to be more closer to the doing work. So it worked out really well. And I moved back to that company. And then I worked there for almost a decade. And what they did was they found technologies that university professors were working on, and then they created them, helped to drive them into drugs. So if Dr. Smith was talking about maybe some genetic targeting in the junction pathways, if there was something that they identified, then we would find a way to target that that gene that she might have been working with, and then we would have taken it through all the clinical studies and taken it to market. And then now, last year, I switched jobs and I work now at a pharmaceutical company. And what I do is we have a whole portfolio of non-registrational clinical studies that we basically manage, and it's on a global level. So I think that, one, again, having had some of the business exposure when taking the courses then helped in being able to, one, do the consulting and then get that more experience and then transition that to the other two positions. I think that's it. I mean, there's lots of opportunities both at home. I mean, there are opportunities everywhere in terms of, if you're just a little more creative in what you're thinking. And then I think the other key thing is that a lot of people are interested in, well, one, we can be free labor, and if you have the bandwidth and the ability to do it, it's a good opportunity for you to develop your skills. While at the same time, people always need additional hands, and sometimes even if it's not a project or something that you're super interested in, by assimilation from all the different chatter and activities going on around you, you might learn a ton.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Nesbeth. And as you mentioned, taking some business courses, trying to get onto the entrepreneurship side of things. What advice would you be able to give someone who wants to maybe start up their own business, maybe in nutraceuticals or something of that nature?
Wow. Okay. I mean, at least especially at home, one of the bigger things you have to be thinking about is the funding, right? Because, all of these ventures take cash. Grants are like one of the biggest avenues for bringing in money. And, so I would definitely try to align with one of the professors who has experience writing compelling grants. And, there are lots of organizations, that will provide grants even locally. But the thing is, you really have to write a strong grant application. And I think that's one of the things that I had a lot of experience with at my previous job. That was the mode by which, you see, the thing is that, especially starting off a company or starting off a business or that sort of thing, the risk is so high. And so what we had done as our, financial journey is basically focused heavily on getting what's called non-dilutive funding, when you don't have to invest money and give out parts of your company to other people. Like if you had like a venture capital person investing or that sort of thing. And so we used to write a lot of grants to get the proof of concept, like, can this even really work? That sort of thing. And then once you've reached to some sort of inflection point where you see, oh, there's real viability in this can make money. At that point, you could go out and try and, get other people to invest. But in the beginning, one of the biggest things is, how do I get money to even get this tested? And so I think working with someone who has experience writing grants, putting in some grants, getting some money to drive forward. But I think other thing is, really think through the whole plan, like, how are you going to get from A to B, the next step? How are you going to get it to the market, like, who are you going to be selling it to, all of those business plan components. You really have to sit down and put those all together, and then realize that, it's usually not easy. I remember going to a talk once from one of the leaders of Regeneron, and basically they had left their academic job and gone in to found this company, and they were working for maybe 13 years building out this portfolio of different drugs. And they kind of talked through the ups and downs, how they had to like even take out loans to pay their employees and all these different things. And then one went big, and they were then shown as overnight successes, and he was like, overnight success, I've been working on this for like 13 years. So usually we see the end product and don't realize like how much work have to go into really building out these things.
Great, thank you so much for that. Another question is relating to organizations that students can join in for networking or expanding their network in biochemistry or molecular biology, microbiology related fields. Are there any organizations that you are a part of or you have been a part of where students can join to expand their network?
That's interesting. I think for me, one of the easiest. I don't think I can think of any organization right now, but maybe if I think a little bit harder, I can send. But I think one of the best routes I think can be easily tapped into is both alumni, and usually they're happy to help, but how do you get to them? Because you don't know who's an alumni. So I think that, one of the things is really like, all your professors, Dr. Roy is phenomenal. But if you go to her and you say, look, I'm interested in XYZ, I'm sure she'll find somebody who you can talk to. And then usually that person will find someone else to connect you to, etc. So I think that that's one of the, the best routes to go. But as Dr. Smith mentioned earlier, like if you also look in LinkedIn and you see, oh, this other person also went to UE, and you send them an email connection, and send them a message. Hey, I see that you are now a intellectual property lawyer. I have no idea what that does, but I'd like to know if it's something I could do. Do you have time to talk? I think that's also a good opportunity to do so. But I think just, finding the right person that you want to meet with and reaching out to somebody who might be able to get you in that direction.
Right. A question from a student here asking, what was the duration of your PhD journey?
So I looked out in a sense. So I went pretty fast. I did it in 4.5 years. I think the average in my program was about 6. But as I said, from the jump off, I was also like, gotta go, I need to just get through this or whatever. And it was hard. I had a professor who was he was young as well. So I think that also was helpful. He was passionate. He would say things like, science is your life. So, he expected you to be there from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., which also helped in kind of driving you to kind of just get the information out. But yeah, I kind of, sometimes there was one point in time when I was in the lab, definitely 7 days, maybe 9 to 5 minimally, all of those 7 days a week from like January to May. And I was like, okay, this is not sustainable, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up question in terms of your journey and your experience, how it has been. Is there anything that you would have done differently?
Differently? No, maybe I would have thought a little bit more, as I said, about the opportunity to spend a year in France or whatever, knowing that, okay, time isn't really as short as I think it is. Just get that life experience. Other than that, I think that, I guess for me, I've taken this sort of, I mix up all the different things that I might be interested in and just go along different paths.
Okay. Another interest of students is internships, and how do you go about getting internships? Where do you look? And do we get paid or not? Is it worth it? Anything to say on that?
Well, it depends. As I said, I mean, it depends. Locally, you have to try and work around finding out who might be. But just expecting people to always post opportunities is not always going to work. So as I mentioned, for instance, with TMRU, there wasn't any job posting or any internship posted. I asked somebody if they could introduce me to the TMRU head. Talked to he put me on to someone else. We sat down, had a little mini interview, and they put me into an opportunity, and it led to a paid opportunity. So sometimes you might have to take a step back in order to accommodate that, and that's if you can. I mean, I understand things are expensive. You might not always have the luxury of doing that, but if you can, it's a good opportunity to get in. As I mentioned, that then I got a salary for 2 years after that. Other than that, I mean, it depends on, there are international opportunities too. But I think, as I said, many of these things might just be putting yourself out there, talking to people, saying, hey, I'm interested in there. Is there anything at your company that is available? Can I do this with you? Some, if you look more, I guess, broadly internationally, but then you have to think about, even if you do get paid and you had to travel overseas to do it, then you have to pay for your accommodation and your food and whatever. So it might be a wash. So locally, I'd say just, try to figure out who you know in different places. If you are overseas or have the opportunity to go overseas, there are programs, like even the NIH has programs, and they include international students that you can apply for research fellowships. But often some of the government entities require some sort of permanent residence or whatever. But you can look at companies that are more global, some pharmaceutical companies. The other day at work, somebody just sent a resume from a high schooler, and it was kind of circulated, and it was basically, oh, can this person do anything at the company? And especially now with everyone working remotely, if somebody was like, yeah, I really need this sorted out quickly, there's a lot more flexibility in your ability to work. So I think, even if you find someone overseas, I'd say reach out and see if there's any opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Nesbeth, for being here. I think this has been a very beneficial discussion, a very fruitful conversation. And students, if you have any more questions, please direct them in the live chat that is on the YouTube stream. As we are about to close, before we do, just a reminder to everyone that the faculty's Mr. and Miss SciTech competition pageant actually is coming up next month on March 13th. So mark your calendars and stay updated with all things Faculty of Science and Technology on social media. Follow us at FST_UE Mona. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I want to thank you again for being here as students and being able to ask questions and engage in the discussion. As we close, firstly, I want to thank all of our guest speakers for showing interest in this student development initiative. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really appreciative that you have taken time to be here, because I know with all your accomplishments, you must be all busy professionals. So once again, thank you so much for being here and for being present for this student initiative. Thank you as well to Professor Marcia Roy and Dr. Charlene Brown, who were very instrumental in assisting with the organization of this session. Thank you so much for your help and for your assistance. And of course, to our lovely FST PRO, Danielle Nicole, thank you for all the hard work today for setting up and running the session behind the scenes today. Thank you so much. Danielle, I don't see where we have any more questions at this time. So thank you to, most of all, our invitees, or students who have been in attendance and have been engaging in this session. I really hope that this session was beneficial and fulfilling for you guys. Thank you all for being here. And this is where we will end for this evening's webinar. Seeing that there are no more questions, thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.
SciTech and my fellow dreamers, my name is Anna K. Green, your favorite future chemist and contestant number 1 in the upcoming Mr. and Mrs. SciTech pageant. On March 13, don't forget to tune in to the biggest, baddest and most exciting event coming up. For SciTech Week, go out, represent and show your colors. Represent the Faculty of Greatness. Don't forget to come out on March 13th and I hope to see you guys there.
Hello everybody, my name is Ashagara, representing the Faculty of Greatness, Faculty of Science and Technology. You know to say it twice. I am one of your contestants to be the next Mr. SciTech, so make sure you turn out and continue to support the Faculty of Science and Technology.
Hello beautiful people, I am Monica Hartman from the Faculty of Greatness, the big bad Faculty of Greatness, of course the Faculty of Science and Technology. I am also a contestant, so come on out on March 13, come see the crowning of your king and your queen.
Hey everyone, my name is Carmichael Anthony, a contestant in the Mr. and Miss SciTech competition this year. I'm fully representing the Faculty of Science and Technology. Big up SciTech.
Happy SciTech Week. My name is Hassana Al-Sab and I am competing to be your ambassador as Miss SciTech. Big up to all SciTech students near and far as we celebrate the Faculty of Greatness.
Hello everyone, it's SciTech Week. Yeah, everything online, but you know, SciTech still taking over the world. So come join me, Akeem Campbell, contestant number 1 in this year's, the inaugural Mr. Science and Technology. But wait, I'm ripping my yellow. Where's my blue?
Happy SciTech Week. I am Khalifa Wright, contestant number 2 in the Miss SciTech competition. What are we doing? We're celebrating the Faculty of Greatness. So, relax, enjoy. SciTech Week from the SciTech family.
Hi everyone, my name is Sayini Elliott and I am representing the Department of Geography and Geology in this year's Miss SciTech pageant. I'm here to represent you, the Faculty of Greatness. Big up SciTech.
What's up everyone? I'm Kelia Heine, contestant number 3 in the Mr. and Miss SciTech competition. Join me and bring the vibes as we celebrate SciTech Week. Destined for greatness.
My name is Tariq McLean. You're a contestant in the Mr. and Mrs. SciTech competition, representing the one and only Faculty of Greatness.
Destined for greatness, so we not deal with no fakeness. From life side to physics, yellow and blue, the sky is the limit. SciTech we destined for greatness, so we not deal with no fakeness. From life side to physics, yellow and blue, the sky is the limit.